researchers are typically involved. And ultimately, you know, a lot of this stuff, even though we talked about your machine's about to die, even though we talked about a lot of the RFP stuff in for software as a service, you still need to do that with infrastructure as a service. Did I kick that out? And that's a big issue. So, in summary, I like the last one. We'll just leave it at the last one. The last bullet point is the most important, right? Common sense is not optional. The whole point here is you use the guidance. I swear to God, you have 99% of the information you already need to make good decisions about where, when, and how you will implement and use cloud computing and in which forms. It's started to settle down in terms of, you know, what is hype and what isn't. I think it's very easy for most folks, frankly, to be able to make and connect the dots between what we've been doing with outsourcing, what we've been doing with virtual hosting for years. Just understand the nuanced differences between that and cloud computing in its various forms, understand how to separate the hype, and the guidance does a really, really good job of getting you there. We do need some tactical fixes, but for the most part, I think it's starting to finally settle down. People are starting to understand, okay, great, I'll use public cloud when I can. If I'm heavily regulated or I have very critical data, I probably won't put it out there for a while. I'll start to continue to build my private cloud environments until the two things are ready, and then we'll meet in the middle. Not really shocking, right? I mean, it's not particularly confusing. But there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of concern about these models where people tell you it's perfectly secure, don't put your stuff there, and yet there's really no illustrations of a lot of companies doing that, or you read case studies that seem like that people are rushing to put their most critical data, but in many cases they're prohibited from doing so because of compliance. Right? So when you sift through that stuff, I think what you'll find is that, again, you apply common sense and you have an awful lot of what you would need. Here's the contact information for CSA. Please do get involved in any form, even if it's lurking, because you'll absorb stuff by osmosis, and that will be helpful too. So I think we might have maybe 1 or 2 minutes for questions if you have any, and otherwise I'll shut up.
Do you have any data on what the customers are using, what the cloud, how they're securing their data? Are they encrypting it, or they use APs connected against any vulnerabilities that might exist that you can do?
Yeah, so how are people securing their data in the cloud? So if we look at infrastructure as a service, software as a service, it's up to the SaaS provider, whatever the controls they put in place, short of you defining policy on who has access to it, maybe integration with identity systems, it's up to, it's whatever they put in place for the most part. Maybe they give you options to encrypt or not. But for platform infrastructure as a service, a lot of people are employing encryption both in storage, clearly they use SSL for encryption in transit. A lot of people are using IPsec VPNs to provide connectivity, host the actual data bases elsewhere, which, depending on latency and the types of application architectures, may or may not be applicable. Right? Not a golden rule. But for the most part, anything that you used to deploy, I have a presentation on Friday that talks about this. But the whole point is cloud is really driving us back to the host-based security models. Right, for the most part, because in many cases the network has become really dumbed down, and I can't easily or as easily deploy multi-tier, n-tier architectures in cloud environments like Amazon, given the way or given the lack of flexibility I have in networking capabilities. So they're putting more and more stuff in the host. And the good side of that is that they're instrumenting their applications more, and as part of this operation, part of the operational automation that goes along with some of that, they're kind of most applications that are right for the cloud are technically being rewritten for the cloud. You don't just kind of pick them up and move them. They don't work as well. In fact, in some cases, they don't work at all. So as part of that, they're starting to build in the instrumentation they never had. They get monitoring back again. Maybe they provide better visibility in some cases to different IT departments, so they all have a lens to look through. But you're rolling, you're putting a lot of controls back in the host. Anyhow, there. That's true.
Have there been any documented instances of malicious insider?
Any documented instances of malicious insider? It depends on if you want to include any of the kind of Web 2.0-ish application vendors in your definition of cloud. There are SaaS like web app vendors who are branded cloud vendors. But in terms of folks like Amazon and Google, to my knowledge, I haven't seen any publicly. That doesn't mean there aren't, but yeah, I haven't seen any others. I mean, you see, for example, like if you want to log Twitter as a cloud app, there was the same thing for admin accounts of Twitter, like those sorts of things. But in terms of Amazon and folks like Rackspace and whatnot, they've gone through enough of these kind of audit and architecture design reviews that at least at that level suggest that they've done a good job of role-based access control and separation of duties, as they should. That's the first, that's in the top 10 questions, right? You want to ask, how do you do, Mr. Cloud Operator, separation of duties? Who has access to what? Can you decrypt this? Can you see that? Hopefully the answer is no, right? So. Oh, jeez. Yes, Mr. Gordon.
I heard a rumor that you can't be PCI compliant in Amazon. Is that a myth? What is the fact depiction?
Don't you have a talk on this?
No.
So PCI level 1 compliance? PCI level 2 compliance? Yeah, so depends on what's in scope, right? And I think what's difficult about, and good about your question is that there is a special interest group being formed by PCI DSS to focus on virtualization, to address such things as one function per machine. Well, what's a machine in virtualized or cloud environments? What does that mean? Does that mean a VM? I happen to have first-hand knowledge of it's not technically cloud, but of a customer who went through an entire PCI audit without being disclosed without disclosing because they weren't asked. It's the IT don't ask, don't tell policy, that they were 100% virtualized. So they asked all the questions about how this operates. They got all the logs. They saw all the things that they asked about firewalls and WAFs and this and that. Were never asked if they were virtualized. They were. And in the spirit of what you see today, based on the question that was asked, are they compliant? Yes, no, maybe, probably not. Especially given the spirit of what the QSA might ask or I might interpret that. So, equally as odd, I've seen things like people talk about secondhand knowledge about, for example, doing audits and a cloud provider saying that they are PCI compliant. And when you dig deeper, what you find is that the stuff that was hosted at the site, the customer's website, in the cloud environment, was absolutely PCI compliant because it was not in scope at all, because all of the credit card transaction processing was done and redirected offsite to a credit card processor that wasn't cloud-based. So, these definitions of nuances of what they mean when they say that. If you ask a cloud provider, they will say PCI compliant. Yeah, we can be PCI compliant. We can help you be PCI compliant. They don't talk about which level. They don't talk about how. Now that will ultimately and potentially change once the compliance requirements change. Today, I think, I don't know if anybody that uses Amazon Web Services level 1 that is certified as being PCI compliant. I'd love to find them. You? Okay, so I think that's the end of the talk, because Jack is tapping his watch.
Yes.
Now that means he's out of battery.
I'm out of battery.
It's time to go. Okay. Thanks so much.